When I read his bio, which today I'm not going to do, you've heard the bio that gets read. I want to speak a little from the heart. And before he was elected U.S. Senator in 1984, he was a judge executive. He was the judge executive of Jefferson County. And to jump from being a county judge to becoming our United States Senator was quite an achievement. It was even a greater achievement because in 1984, only one Republican challenger in the U.S. Senate seats across the nation won. Leader McConnell won that race in 1984, being the only Republican challenger to do so across the country. What an amazing feat that was. And since then, his leadership has just continued to grow and to represent us as Kentuckians in a very special way. Now the longest serving Kentuckian to ever serve in the United States Senate. He's only the second United States Senator from Kentucky to ever be leader, to be the national leader of the Republican Senate, of the Senate, all Senate. So what a special accomplishment that is. Dwayne, thank you for bringing that up because we can talk about projects and what an amazing project that is. That actually grew a state match and county match into a $150 million project. And now we're talking about a project that really just blows that away, and that's the Bridge Bridge. With Leader McConnell's leadership again, by working with a bipartisan effort to pass an infrastructure bill, we are standing here now at a time when it looks like the Bridge Bridge will break ground next year. And as it sits today, without tolls, things can change. That's the current climate that we're in. And again, an amazing feat by Leader McConnell and his colleagues. We're always excited when Boone County and Florence and Northern Kentucky has the leader here to visit us. And he is a friend. He's a Kentuckian, and he is our special guest today. So at this time, Leader McConnell, please join me.
Thank you very much, Gary, and I'd like to congratulate you again on becoming the national chair of the National Association of Counties. Your term is up now, right?
Past president for a few more days.
Past president. It's great to be back here. A lot of news the last week or so. Big news. Why don't I start with that? But I do want to mention the Bridge first because you can imagine my relief after all these years of coming up here and not having to try to figure out how we're going to get this done. And as Gary indicated, I was actually the only Republican member of the Kentucky delegation who voted for the infrastructure bill. Not only did I vote for it, I helped put it together because this has been a long-standing challenge for previous federal administration. The Obama administration hoped to put it together. The Trump administration hoped to put it together. My wife was Secretary of Transportation during those years. Finally, it seemed like the atmosphere was conducive to getting a result. Our neighbors in the North Rock Volland were very much involved in pulling all this together as well. Didn't believe we'd actually probably be able to do this without tolls. That may be possible as well. I'm sure that doesn't make anybody happy at all, right? So progress on that front, I think, is important. Let me just turn to the news of the day. As you know, my top priority during my period as majority leader, by the way, been majority leader, and I've been minority leader, majority federal. was the federal judiciary. I had made a very, at the time, controversial decision not to fill the vacancy created by Justice Scalia's passing during the presidential election in 2016. That set up the opportunity when my party won the White House to fill that vacancy. We had a second opportunity when Justice Kennedy retired. The Kavanaugh nomination, as you recall, was quite dramatic. And then we had a third opportunity in the fall of 2020 when Justice Ginsburg passed away. A third new Supreme Court justice, Amy Coney Barrett. What did all these men and women have in common? They believe that the job of the judge is to try to follow the law. And Justice Scalia, who I think was kind of the most significant Supreme Court justice of the modern era, developed a following of lawyers and judges around the country who believe in the plank motion that maybe a judge will try to follow the law. And used to say, you're not very happy if you're not occasionally unhappy with the outcome you reach because it's not your personal opinion. It's what the Constitution, the law, require. I think these men and women are in the process at the Supreme Court level and below that at the circuit court level. The same circuit with Ohio and Michigan and Tennessee. The three new circuit judges that I recommended, the previous president, all I think look at judging the way I just described it. The outcome, I think, has been becoming apparent already in a number of different areas. I'll start first with a decision just this morning that you may not yet have heard about. There was a case before the Supreme Court decided this morning of a football coach from the state of Washington who was fired because he engaged in a team prayer at the 50-yard line after the game was over. He got fired for that. Supreme Court today held 6-3. 6-3. That violated not only religious freedom, but free speech right. Chalk one up for the Supreme Court. Last week was also a big week in two ways on the issue of guns and school safety. I participated in a bipartisan agreement in the Senate to target school safety and mental health. The bill that we passed in the Senate, which the House ended up and passed on Friday and the President signed on Saturday, does not take away any gun rights from anyone. It is targeted entirely at school safety and mental health. The one way in which it makes a minor change that hopefully will produce major results is that it opens up the possibility of background checks in the juvenile law for those under 21. And if you look at these mass shootings, they've not all been carried out by deranged young men, but many of them have, including involving Texas. At the same time, the U.S. Supreme Court reinforced the rights of law-abiding gun owners in a decision that basically made it possible for people who, under previous decisions, have a firearm at home to protect themselves, also protect themselves outside the house. So on the same week, both we targeted mental health and school safety through legislation, and the Supreme Court underscored the right to protect yourself under the Second Amendment. And then the decision that everyone is talking about with regard to the abortion issue, what the court did in effect was return this very controversial issue to the people and their representatives, so that it can be decided through the democratic process. Now, that's almost entirely likely to occur at the state level. And let me tell you why. In the Senate, most things require 60 votes, not just 51. Neither side of this issue has come anywhere close to having 60 votes. So I think this is likely to all be litigated out, dealt with in the various states around the country through the democratic process. All of these, I think, are landmark decisions. Decisions, I think, rendered by men and women who believe the job of the judge follow the law. Now, some have said, with regard to the abortion case, that precedent should always prevail. And I think we have a new county attorney here. I'm gonna put her on the spot. But let me just say, precedent is important. It is important. But sometimes precedent is wrong. So let me give you a classic example of someone that involved a Supreme Court justice from Kentucky. The case was Plessy versus Ferguson. The case in 1896 upheld racial segregation on rail cars, which is the way people moved around then. There was one dissenter in that case. The dissenter was John Marshall Harlan from Kentucky, who went to Center College. He was appointed to the Supreme Court by Rutherford B. Hayes in 1877 and served until 1911. And John Marshall Harlan said that was a violation of the 14th Amendment and also a violation of the Civil Rights Bill that was passed by the Congress that was largely irreversible. 58 years later, the Supreme Court in Brown versus Board of Education basically adopted Harlan's dissenting opinion, and it became 9-0, the law of the land, bringing down racial segregation in public education. So I raise that just to make the point that precedent is important, but sometimes the precedent is outdated or wrong. And this issue sent back to the democratic process for the will of the American people who are elected their representatives to make the decision. Now, what else is going on? We've got rising inflation. We've got supply chain problems. The country's economic condition is not good. And here's the reason for it, principle. As we were coming out of the pandemic, we had 3 vaccines. The economy was beginning to pick up. And this new Democratic government, President, Democratic House, and a narrowly Democratic Senate, 50-50. I've been the majority leader, and I've been the minority leader. Majority is better. Narrowly, Senate used advice, which is not improper. We used it too to do the 2017 tax bill, to work around the 60-vote threshold. And what they wanted to do and did was to dump $2 trillion on the economy. $2 trillion. Now, a judge can tell you he's happy to have the money, and I hope he spends it wisely, but he knows why I didn't vote for it. Larry Summers, who was Bill Clinton's Secretary of the Treasury, and Jason Furman, who was President Obama's top economic guy, both said at the time, if you dump $2 trillion on the economy, you're going to create raging inflation. They said it at the time. So we have 40-year high inflation entirely as a result of a gargantuan mistake for our economy made last year. That's why you're stunned when you fill up your car stunned when you go to the grocery store. And honestly, the bad news is about the only way I think we've ever been able to fix inflation is when the Fed raises the interest rates, and you're beginning to see that happen. And when that begins to happen, then the signal is likely that you're going to have some kind of economic slowdown. The biggest domestic mistake in my memory was dumping $2 trillion from the economy last year. So I think the only way out of that gargantuan mistake is probably going to create other economic problems. That would explain why the president's approval rating is below 40%, which leads me to what typically happens 2 years into a new administration. Frequently, the voters receive the buyer's remorse. They go out and make a decision in a presidential year, and 2 years in, they take a look at the situation and say, whoops, I'm not sure I did the right thing. That happened to Bill Clinton 2 years in, happened to Barack Obama 2 years in, happened to Donald Trump 2 years in. So usually a tough year for the party of the White House. How tough a year it is depends upon how bad a shape the president is in, and President Biden is in tough shape. So there's a reasonable chance that the voters will send a message, sort of a midterm report card on the performance of this administration this fall. So you probably are curious, what do you think? What do you think happens when you have divided government? Well, here's the way I look at it. We have pretty big differences. In fact, I know Joe Biden really well. We served together for years. He was never a moderate. I myself a moderate while he ran for president because he was running against Bernie Sanders and conservative moderate. But when he got elected, he pretty much adopted their agenda. And if you look at the regulations, I was with a group earlier this morning, we were talking about problems with over-regulation, kind of people are appointed. This has been a pretty far left administration. So Clinton, who was, shall I say, flexible, after getting his you-know-what kick 2 years in, I was sitting there along with others, listening to the State of the Union, and here's the first word out of his mouth. Bill Clinton said, the era of big government is over. This is a flexible guy. We used to say he could cry out one eye, whichever one was closest to the camera. Whether Joe Biden has the dexterity, shall I say, to pull off a pivot or not, I don't know, but he won't have any choice. He wants to be able to function the next 2 years with divided government. He'll need to come to the middle. And I've already indicated to you, I'm not always opposed to doing bipartisan deals. I've done infrastructure, I voted for postal reform, and I was one of the minority of my party who voted for the school safety mental health bill just last week. So I'm not opposed to doing everything. But I think when you have divided government, if you think of football field, between the 40-yard lines are the places where you might be able to have some agreements that are neither party's top priorities, but make some progress for the country, no matter what kind of government the American people elect. So if I'm the majority leader, we'll be really picky on appointments. There are 1,200 executive branch appointments that come to us. They're not all as important as the Supreme Court, many of them are quite important. They have to be confirmed by the Senate. So we're in the personnel bill, the House is not. And so we'll be way more picky over who gets to head various boards and commissions and agencies that are important to how all of you function in our society. We won't be doing any spending there. But if we can find ways to make some progress for the country here down with divided government, we'll do it. So that's kind of how I see where we are, I do want to touch on one other issue that I think is exceedingly important. We have to beat the Russians in Ukraine. We have to beat the Russians. Some of you may be thinking, oh, we have plenty of problems at home, and why are we doing this? But let me disabuse you of the notion of why we're doing it. If we don't stop the Russians in Ukraine now, it's going to cost a whole lot more later. You have courageous people whose country's been invaded, who are still willing to fight, and all they're asking from us is help to make them, to give them the ability to fight. My attitude is, I'm willing to give them anything that'll shoot that they think will be helpful. We're not the only ones carrying this burden. All the European countries have really stepped up, all of them, particularly those NATO countries right along the border, Poland in particular. They've got almost 1 million Ukrainian refugees in their country. They're putting them up in their homes, taking care of them. Some of you may have seen, I went to Ukraine about a month ago. And I had a chance to talk to President Zelensky and he's really an inspiration. Our nickname for him is he's Winston Churchill in a t-shirt. And this is a guy who had somebody made it. My wife used to watch this show on Netflix that made him famous. He had a comedy show, a running comedy show in Ukraine about corruption in government. He became quite famous. He created a party named after the show and won the election. And so people will wonder, this guy going to be like? I could have told them we had an actor in the White House that worked out pretty well, Ronald Reagan. You never can tell about the show that people. He is not interested in giving up, and they're in a dogfight in the eastern part of the country. And I think our view ought to be, as long as they're willing to fight, we need to help them fight. Now, if some of you are thinking, well, what about China? What does this have to do with China? Here's the answer. The Prime Minister of Japan and the Defense Minister of Japan both said recently, if you want to stand up to President Xi, China beat Putin in Ukraine. Beat Putin in Ukraine. Because the Chinese are taking a look at this and trying to make their own calculation of whether their effort to take over Taiwan would be a plus or a minus. How much of an impact are the sanctions having on the Russians? The Chinese are more integrated to the world economy than the Russians are. That probably makes them pretty nervous. So this is extremely important. And even though we have a lot of domestic issues, I don't want you to lose sight of this, because I think this is critically important to the future of the world. America needs to lead, and much good has come out of it. The Germans are moving away from Russian energy. They can't be done overnight, but that's an important step in the right direction. Finland and Sweden, after we left Kyiv, we went to Copenhagen and Helsinki, happened to be there, good timing, happened to be there when we were debating their interest in getting into NATO. The Swedes have always been neutral. They haven't been in the military line for 200 years. They now want to be in NATO. So does Finland. And they both have terrific militaries and add to NATO's strength. In fact, they're much better militarily than some of the current members in NATO. So they're not a drag, they're an asset. And Finland has an 830-mile border with the Russians. So nothing Putin wanted to happen, it turned out. He thought the Ukrainians would welcome him. He thought the Germans would split from NATO on this issue. Hadn't happened. He thought it would divide NATO. Not at all. Everything he wanted to happen has not turned out well. So the only threat to winning ultimately, and my definition of winning is what was the Zelensky says winning is. In other words, I don't think we're going to try to force him into a settlement because he got to live with it. The only way this could turn out poorly, in my view, is if we sort of lose interest, or the Europeans sort of lose interest. So keep this on your radar screen. It is important to the future of our country and the world. None of this works out well without America leading on an issue like this. As long as the president's trying to do the right thing, I'm going to be with him, because I think we need to be as unified as possible. And so with that, let me thank you all for the opportunity to be here. I deeply appreciate all you do. Have a good day.
We have about 15 minutes and we can open up more questions. Healthcare costs are really coming up these days. In fact, I just had a friend who is retired. 2 prescriptions cost $1,800 a month. These are for mental health. There's no generics. And there's people in that box and somehow get drug prices under control. I think we really need this. First part. I have a good friend who has a mental health issue. She just got on 2 new prescriptions, total of $1,800 a month. Prescriptions are working wonders, and but they're on Social Security, just sucking the life out of it. And I don't know what we can do with that, but I think something needs to be done.
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that particular issue, but the cost of prescription drugs is an issue in the country. It's been a big issue in Congress, and there's a sort of back and forth on the question of whether the government ought to set the prices or not. And you can imagine it's an argument either way. If the government sets the prices entirely on prescription drugs, the concern is that the amount spent on innovation and product development goes down, and the number of life-saving cures goes up. So it's a very, very complicated issue. But there's no question that some needed drugs are outrageously expensive. No question.
You mentioned the $2 trillion being dumped on the economy. We also have that interest rates rising. Do we run the risk of passing the point of no return, the negative of escape velocity, and our ability to service the debt on $28–30 trillion that's out there now? How do we overcome that? How do we ever get that down if rates continue to rise and our debt service continues to decline with more money being dumped on the system?
Yeah, I mean, the size of the debt is stunning, absolutely stunning. And much of it is driven by things that we like, popular programs. Some of the additional, obviously, in the last 2 years were necessary because of the pandemic. So it's no choice. We had to try to float the economy during that period. Propping up businesses, developing miracle cures overnight. It was a hell of a challenge. But as I said earlier, having largely gotten over that hump, I thought we made I said they made a classic mistake in adding $2 trillion more, which is clearly a mistake. Even Janet Yellen, in a unguarded moment, admitted a couple of weeks ago it was a mistake. So I think we just got to quit doing what we're doing and get economic growth up again. One of the problems I didn't mention that I think a lot of people are running into is the reluctance of people to go out to work. That's part of that is related to all of the borrowed money we sent into people's accounts, so that their bank accounts are much heavier than they've been. And so when they start weighing whether or not it's worth going back to work, many people don't. So we have supply chain issues, inflation, and the difficulty going back to work. So don't be fooled by the unemployment figure. Unemployment is figured this way. What percentage of those who want to work are working? What percentage of those who want to work are working? The problem is the number of people who want to work, the labor participation rate is way down. Until those people run out of money and start deciding they'd rather work, stay at home, I don't see this getting better quickly. And I've already said, I think with the Fed raising the interest rates the way they are, we're looking at a slowdown. I don't know how big a slowdown it's got. It's the only way I can think of to squeeze this inflation out. The only thing that's ever worked in the past. So that's not a pretty picture. I wish I could tell you otherwise. Yes, sir.
Has there been any discussion on starting the wall back up between the United States and Mexico?
Yeah, well, the wall was actually effective. It was never finished. That's not all we need to do, but that's part of it. And honestly, this administration basically had an open borders policy. I mean, if you ever just look at the coverage, people are storming across the border. In fact, I think the three biggest issues this fall will be inflation, crime, and open borders. They're likely to be the three biggest issues nationwide going into this fall. The crime rate is stunning as well. And the administration, many Democrats, particularly those in big cities, don't even seem to want to prosecute people anymore. One hopeful sign is that a number of prosecutors on the left coast have been recalled recently. They have recall out there and get fired.
They had some assassins that infiltrated the border down there that was going to kill George Bush. Did you hear that?
I'm sorry.
The assassins that infiltrated our border, and their mission was to kill George Bush.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that on an FBI report.
Can I take one more question?
We'd like to read the claim up there. You-
Given the passage of the recent mental health bill and school safety bill, I was wondering where you stand on arming teachers and staff members.
You said, how do I feel about arming teachers and staff members? I think that has to be decided by the school board. I do think the school safety is really, really important, which in this bill that I supported last week is a significant amount of additional money for that. But a decision like that would not be made in Washington. It would be made in a given school board, and in a kind of Boone County would have to decide what the trade-offs are. So I wouldn't try to make that decision in Washington. Okay, thanks everybody. I really appreciate it.